Okay, I want you to close your eyes for a second. Seriously. Imagine there are these tiny microscopic shards of glass floating around in your bloodstream. And slowly they start to drift down, settling into, the gravity wells of your body, your big toe, your knees, your fingers.
Right.
But they don't just sit there. They crystallize. They start to organize into these jagged, really sharp needle-like formations.
Oh, wow.
So now, every time you take a step or you bend a finger, you aren't just moving a joint. You are literally grinding bone and sensitive tissue against broken glass.
It's a terrifying image, isn't it? It sounds like something out of a horror movie, but for millions of people, that is the biological reality of a Tuesday morning.
That visceral description was the hook that just grabbed me when I started reading through this stack of research. We're talking about gout.
We are.
But we aren't just talking about the pain, and we're definitely not just going to repeat the standard advice you get on a pamphlet. Usually the conversation around gout is so negative.
It is. It's always about what you can't have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No steak, no beer, no shellfish, no joy.
The thou shalt not approach. And for a long time, it's been the gold standard because, it makes logical sense. If a substance causes the problem, you stop consuming it.
Right.
But the research we're digging into today suggests that restriction is only half the battle. And maybe not even the most effective half.
Okay.
We're looking at a biological state called hyperuricemia that's just high uric acid, and treating it by adding things to the diet.
Which is such a better psychological approach. Instead of a diet of deprivation, we're looking at what our sources call a fruit pharmacy,
Exactly.
a specific grocery list of 12 items that can actively lower this stuff. But before we get to that shopping list, we have to understand the mechanism. I want to get a little technical for a minute. We always hear that purines are the bad guys, but why? What is actually happening at the molecular level to create those glass needles?
So it all starts with purines. They're just chemical compounds, and they're found in your own cells and, in certain foods. Red meat, organ meats, high fructose corn syrup are the big ones. Okay.
When your body breaks down old cells, or processes that steak dinner, it metabolizes those purines. The byproduct of that whole process is uric acid.
So uric acid is basically cellular trash.
In a manner of speaking, yeah. In a healthy system, it's a waste product. It even acts as an antioxidant in the blood for a bit before the kidneys filter it out, and you excrete it through urine.
Okay, simple enough.
The problem, hyperuricemia, happens when that balance just tips. So either you're producing way too much uric acid for the kidneys to handle,
Right.
or the kidneys themselves just aren't filtering it efficiently enough.
And when the concentration gets too high in the blood, the liquid turns into a solid. It precipitates.
It crystallizes.
Yeah.
And it prefers to do so in cooler parts of the body, which is why the big toe is such a common target.
Oh, because it's the furthest point from the heart and generally cooler. That makes so much sense.
Exactly.
So if the problem is a chemistry problem, an oversaturation of this acid, then the solution we're exploring today is using food chemistry to intervene.
We're talking neutralizers, blockers, and flushers. Let's start with the heavy hitters then. The research calls this section the fruit pharmacy, and leading the charge is the humble cherry.
Cherries are probably the most well-researched food there is when it comes to gout.
The numbers here are they're staggering. One study I saw cited in our notes showed that consuming just 10 cherries a day reduced the risk of recurrent gout attacks by 35%.
35%.
That's comparable to some pharmaceuticals. But here's my question. Is it just eat cherries? Or is there a specific compound we're actually after? Because 35% is a massive drop for a handful of fruit.
It's the anthocyanins. These are basically the pigments that give cherries that deep, dark red color.
Okay.
But biologically, they function in a very similar way to NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen.
Oh, wow.
They inhibit the enzymes, specifically KOX1 and KOX2, that signal inflammation in the body.
So you're basically eating a natural COX inhibitor.
You are, but they do more than just manage the pain. The research suggests these anthocyanins actually help lower the serum uric acid levels themselves, probably by inhibiting production a little or helping with excretion.
Now, does the form matter here? Because I see people in forums asking, can I just drink the sugary cherry juice from the soda aisle, or does it have to be the tart stuff?
The concentration is what matters. Most of the successful studies use tart cherry juice concentrate or extract. That way you get a huge dose of the anthocyanins without eating a kilo of fruit and spiking your blood sugar.
Which, as we'll get into, is completely counterproductive.
Exactly.
Got it. So tart is smart. Now, moving down the fruit aisle, we see blueberries and strawberries. I'm going to assume this is the same mechanism, They're also full of anthocyanins.
It's the same family of compounds, yes. The notes refer to them as crystal breakers, which is a little dramatic, but the idea is prevention. By keeping a steady stream of these antioxidants in your blood, you create an environment where nucleation, the very start of that crystal growth, is just chemically more difficult.
So it disrupts the architecture of the crystal before it can even form.
Precisely.
Now, the next fruit relies on a totally different mechanism. Apples. The source highlights malic acid. I remember malic acid from like winemaking. It's what gives that tart flavor. What's it doing for gout?
Malic acid is really interesting because it seems to act as a kind of solvent. The theory is that it binds to uric acid in the blood and neutralizes it, which makes it easier for the body to eliminate.
It changes the pH environment.
In a way, yes. It makes it so the uric acid is just less likely to precipitate into that solid form.
The recommendation here was very specific.
Yeah.
1 apple after a meal. Why after the meal?
It's likely about timing. You're timing the neutralizer with the input. If you eat a meal that produces purines, having that malic acid present during digestion provides a kind of chemical buffer right when you need it.
Okay, let's talk about citrus oranges, grapefruits. This one surprised me because I usually associate citrus with acidity. If I already have acid in my joints, why on earth would I add citric acid?
This is a classic and very understandable confusion between dietary acidity and the metabolic effect. The hero here is vitamin C, or ascorbic acid.
Oh.
There was a massive 20-year study of over 46,000 men. It showed that those with a higher vitamin C intake were significantly less likely to develop gout.
And we aren't talking about a small margin here, right?
No, it was a clear dose-dependent reduction.
Oh.
The mechanism is that vitamin C is what we call uricosuric.
Uricosuric. That's a great Scrabble word.
It is. It just means it increases the excretion of uric acid in the urine. It effectively tells the kidneys, hey, open the floodgates for this specific compound.
I read a theory that this is actually evolutionary.
Yeah.
That most mammals produce their own vitamin C, but humans lost that ability ages ago.
Right.
And most mammals also have an enzyme called uricase that just breaks down uric acid effortlessly. We lost that too.
That is the leading evolutionary theory. We lost the ability to break down uric acid around the same time we lost the ability to make vitamin C.
Wow.
So by supplementing vitamin C, we're essentially hacking our own primitive biology to help our kidneys do a job they've always struggled with.
It's like a hardware patch for our evolutionary software.
Okay, let's move to the next section. We've covered the solids. Now we need to look at the liquid flesh. This is about the plumbing. And obviously, we have to start with the water.
It seems so trivial to mention water, but we have to understand the biophysics here. Uric acid crystallization is a concentration problem.
Right.
If you have a teaspoon of salt in a tiny shot glass, it just clumps at the bottom. But if you put that same teaspoon in a gallon jug, it dissolves perfectly.
So dehydration creates the supersaturated environment where those crystals can actually form.
Exactly. Dehydration shrinks your blood volume. When that volume drops, the concentration of every solute, including uric acid, goes way up. You're basically forcing the precipitation event by not having enough solvent. And that goal of 5 to 8 glasses isn't just about hydration. It's about maintaining enough volume.
Enough volume to keep the solute dissolved.
Okay, that's the baseline. But here is where the research threw me a total curveball. The next liquid is coffee.
Ah, yes.
And I have to push back on this. Coffee is a diuretic. It makes you pee more, which dehydrates you. If dehydration is the enemy, how is coffee the hero?
You've hit on what we call the caffeine paradox. You are 100% correct that caffeine is a mild diuretic. However, the data on coffee and gout is just overwhelmingly positive.
Really?
We're seeing that drinking coffee, and it has to be regular caffeinated coffee, lowers gout risk significantly.
So the chemical benefit somehow outweighs the dehydration risk.
It absolutely appears to. See, the secret weapon in coffee is a polyphenol chlorogenic acid, but even more importantly, coffee acts as a xanthine oxidase inhibitor.
Xanthine oxidase, that's the enzyme that turns purines into uric acid, right?
It's the gatekeeper enzyme. If you inhibit xanthine oxidase, you stop the purines from ever becoming uric acid in the first place. This is exactly how the main gout drug, allopurinol, works. Coffee is, in essence, a mild, delicious, liquid version of that same mechanism.
That is fascinating. So while the caffeine might cost you a little bit of hydration, which you should obviously replace with more water, the beans themselves are chemically blocking the production line.
It slows production, and oddly enough, it seems to increase insulin sensitivity, which also helps excretion. It's hitting the problem from two different angles.
What about green tea? The notes call it the joint protector. Is that just a weaker version of coffee?
It's a different pathway. Green tea is rich in compounds called catechins, specifically one called EGCG.
Okay.
And while it does have some enzyme inhibitory effects, its main strength in this context seems to be anti-inflammatory. It prevents the immune system from overreacting to the crystals that are already there.
So coffee prevents the trash from being created in the first place.
Right.
And green tea stops the body from setting the existing trash on fire.
That is a very colorful, but yeah, a very accurate way to put it.
Okay, now for the final liquid. And this one is going to be controversial for like anyone following a paleo or keto diet.
Mm-hmm.
Skim milk.
Mm-hmm.
The source calls it the urine accelerator.
Mm.
But wait a second. Milk is protein. Meat is protein. Meat causes gout. Why doesn't milk cause gout?
This is the protein paradox. For years, we all assumed all protein was bad for gout. But it turns out the source matters immensely.
How so?
The purines that cause all the problems are located in the nucleus of a cell in the DNA and RNA. Muscle meat is packed with cells.
Okay.
Milk, however, is a secretion. It has very little cellular material, so it has almost zero purines.
That explains why it's safe, but why is it helpful?
Milk proteins, specifically casein and something called uric acid, have a strong uric effect.
Same as vitamin C.
Exactly. They compete for reabsorption in the kidney. Basically, when you digest milk proteins, the kidneys get busy processing them, and as a side effect, they just dump more uric acid into the urine.
And the research specifically says skim is the fat the issue.
The fat seems to blunt the effects slightly. But more importantly, weight gain is a massive risk factor for gout. Skim milk maximizes the delivery of the protein, the medicine, so to speak, while minimizing the calorie load.
So we're flushing the system with water, blocking the enzymes with coffee, and accelerating excretion with milk proteins. Now we move to the final category, the dietary shifts.
Vegetables and staples.
And we have to start with broccoli.
The low purine star. Broccoli is so useful because it's nutrient dense, it's high in vitamin C, which we know helps, and it's incredibly low in purines. We're talking about 70 milligrams per serving.
Compared to what?
Organ meat can be over 1,000.
Wow. Okay, so it's a safe volume food. You can fill your stomach without filling your blood with acid.
It allows for satiety without the penalty.
Next up is cucumbers, the enzyme bomb. I have to admit, I always think of cucumbers as just crunchy water. Are they actually doing anything chemically?
Well, they are 95% water, so they definitely help with that solvent issue we talked about. But the cooling aspect that's mentioned in the literature, that refers to their ability to inhibit pro-inflammatory enzymes. In traditional medicine, they literally say it cools the blood.
Right.
In modern biochemistry, we'd say it inhibits the synthesis of prostaglandins.
It's the same result, though. You're turning down the heat in the joint.
Even if the description of the mechanism varies, the clinical outcome is reduced swelling.
Now, celery. The notes mention two very specific compounds, luteolin and 3-NB. This sounds like some serious chemistry.
It is. 3-N-butylpholide, or 3-NB for short, is unique to celery. It's actually what gives it that distinct smell.
Okay.
And studies suggest that both 3-NB and luteolin work by blocking that same enzyme we talked about with coffee's anthine oxidase.
So celery is actually doing the same kind of heavy lifting as a pharmaceutical drug.
To a lesser degree, of course, but yes. It reduces the actual production of uric acid. Plus, celery is a natural diuretic, but unlike coffee, it comes packed with its own electrolytes, so it helps flush the kidneys without stripping out essential minerals.
Okay, I want to spend some time on this last one because I think it's the most misunderstood connection of all nuts. Almonds, walnuts, flax seeds. The notes call them fiber heroes, but then there's this note about insulin. What on earth does insulin have to do with crystals in my toe?
This is the aha moment for most of my patients. We tend to think of gout as a meat and beer problem, but increasingly we're viewing it as a metabolic problem, one that is very closely tied to type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance.
So you're saying sugar is just as guilty as steak?
Perhaps even more so. Here's the physiology. When you have high insulin levels, because you're eating sugar or refined carbs, your kidneys go into storage mode. Insulin signals the kidneys to reabsorb sodium, but the transporter that reabsorbs sodium also reabsorbs uric acid.
Wait, so high insulin literally tells your kidneys, don't pee that uric acid out, put it back into the blood.
It locks the exit door. You could be eating a perfectly low purine diet, but if your insulin is chronically high, your kidneys simply won't excrete the little bit of uric acid you do produce.
That is huge. So where do nuts fit into this?
Nuts are high in fiber, healthy fats, and protein with very few carbs. Adding them to a meal lowers the glycemic index of that whole meal. It blunts the insulin spike.
The research suggests, what, 2 tablespoons with every meal?
By doing that, you keep insulin low and stable. When insulin is low and stable, the kidneys open the exit door and uric acid is flushed right out. It's all about changing the hormonal environment of the kidney.
That completely reframes the entire diet. It's not just about avoiding purines. It's about managing insulin so your body can actually get rid of the purines that are there.
It connects all the dots between gout, obesity, and diabetes. They are all, at their core, expressions of metabolic dysfunction.
So we've covered the fruit pharmacy with its anthocyanins and that uric vitamin C.
Mm.
We've covered the liquids that inhibit xanthine oxidase and flush the kidneys. And we've covered the dietary shifts that manage inflammation and, crucially, insulin. When you look at this entire list, cherries, coffee, skim milk, almonds, it feels like a very, very different prescription than the typical starve yourself advice.
It's an abundance mindset, and that
Yeah.
is so crucial for adherence. Telling someone don't eat this requires willpower every single day.
Yeah.
Telling someone eat these delicious cherries and drink this coffee because it literally heals you, that's sustainable.
It changes the entire relationship with food from one of fear to one of function.
Food as medicine is often just a buzzword, but in the case of gout, the pathways are so incredibly clear. We know the enzymes, we know the transport channels in the kidney, and we know exactly which foods can manipulate those levers.
It's biological engineering. You're just using celery instead of steel.
And this brings us to a final thought for you to chew on. We often categorize our pain, if I hit my thumb with a hammer, that's mechanical pain. If I have the flu, that's biological pain.
Okay.
Gout feels mechanical. It feels like a broken glass shard in a joint.
Because it literally is.
It is physical, but the cause is purely chemical. It is a chemistry experiment that has gone wrong inside your blood. And if chemistry broke it, chemistry can fix it.
That's the takeaway.
Yeah.
If you're suffering from what feels like a mechanical failure in your joints, don't just reach for the brace or the painkiller. Look at the inputs. Look at the chemistry set you're building with your breakfast.
And maybe swap that morning donut for a handful of walnuts and a black coffee.
Your kidneys will thank you.
Eh.
That's all for this deep dive into the needle in the joint. We really hope this helps you flush the system and get back on your feet pain-free.
Stay hydrated, everyone.
We'll see you in the next one.